If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But going far can be really complicated.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the What Could Go Right podcast. We are your hosts, Erik Orton.
And I'm Emily Orton.
And here we talk about personal growth and sailing. In 2014, we moved aboard a fixer-upper sailboat and bootstrapped a year sailing with our 5 kids, and it changed our lives forever.
We tell the whole story in our memoir, our book, 7 at Sea. On this podcast, we want to help you go from fear to freedom, one adventure at a time. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But going far can be really complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Right? If Alex Honnold is going to free solo El Cap, he takes nothing with him and he can go super fast. Maybe this isn't an exact match, but when you did it, you took so much gear that it took a lot longer.
I was definitely slower than Alex Honnold.
Yeah.
Understatement of the year.
And you needed a buddy to belay, and it was just slower, but you went with somebody. In that case, you went the same distance. But I think the proverb stands that when you're going far and you're going with other people, it adds layers of complication.
For sure. Okay. Yeah.
So after we had written our memoir, 7 at Sea, I was talking to a friend, and she and her husband have written several books together. So I just jumped at the chance to kind of ask about that experience, because everyone wants to ask us about the adventure of sailing, and almost nobody wants to talk about the experience of actually collaborating on every single word of a 300-page book, or however many pages it is. And so I wanted to kind of hear her story. And she said, oh, yes, he just puts the draft on my desk with the divorce papers on top, or, vice versa. And I thought, I get it. It's a challenge. So today we wanted to kind of talk about collaboration. And for context, we'll just use our personal story of collaborating on writing a book. So whoever you're collaborating with and on whatever the project is, I think you'll find some humor and maybe some tips and principles that might help. And if nothing else, just some validation that, yeah, it's not the easiest way forward. I think it's worth it.
Can I share one brief example?
Yeah, please do.
There's a t-shirt for sailors, and it says, honey, please forgive me for the things that I said while we were docking. Because docking is a 2-person
minimum
endeavor, and inevitably it devolves into a shouting match and all kinds of what? Anyway, that's just a small sailor example of collaboration, docking a boat.
I love it. I actually really love that example, because as you get better at it, you're like, okay, every time we struggle with this, it's you don't know exactly what to expect. It's hard to hear each other when you have your engines running. And let's practice with some hand signals so we'll know what it means. And the more we do it, the smoother it will hopefully get, and the more peaceful it will be.
That's the idea.
Yeah, that's the short version. We'll get into a little more detail here, but that's a good metaphor.
All right, docking a boat and writing a book.
Yeah. So the first question I have for both of us is, whose idea was it? And I would love for you to go first.
Whose idea was it to write the book?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a trap. I definitely feel like this is a trap.
This is not a trap. We might not have the same answer. And that is just a great metaphor for what it means to collaborate in any way.
Okay, I'm gonna skirt around this. I'm not gonna skirt around. I'm gonna say when we lived on the sailboat, I was like, I want to write a blog, and I think you did too. And I was like, no, I'm writing a blog. Like I'm gonna do the writing on this blog. And
you were fine with me writing, but you wanted the kids to write, and you would make their work pass through your quality control. And you're like, no, we're not having that on here. Yes, this one can go.
So I was the editor.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was the editor of our blog, I guess. And then I know that when we came, I think you probably were the first person that said, we should write a book. And I was like, no. And I think I said, eventually I wanted to write a book, but I wanted to write it alone.
Mm-hmm. And I think, why did you want to write it?
because I know how hard collaboration is. Because having written,
Not why did you want to write it alone? Why did you want to write it?
why did I want to write it?
Mm-hmm.
To become rich and famous.
Oh, okay.
That
So
was
yeah,
that.
this
No,
is
no,
different. I
no.
thought it was because
No,
I thought it was because as you would go different places and meet with different people or see people again after we got home, they would say, "When is the book coming out?"
Oh, sorry. I'm that was my facetious answer.
Oh,
No, okay. So I'll tell the story about how the book got started. Is that yeah, we'd been home for the first year after we got back. I would just
for our new listeners. Oh yeah, we lived on a sailboat. We bootstrapped a year on
yeah.
a sailboat. It's in the new
It's in the
intro.
new intro. So you know the overview. So I'm bumping into people that I haven't seen since we'd lived on our sailboat, and everyone's like, "So when do I get to read the book? When's the book coming out? Are you going to write a book? When do I get to read the book? When's the book coming out?" Like everybody asked me this, and I'm like, "There's no book. Read our blog." That's like
Mm-hmm.
we wrote it along the way so that we wouldn't do it. And then anyway, and then I thought, okay, actually, I had a visit with two of my friends that are filmmakers slash screenwriters, and they said no. And I was on the other side of the country. We were on a road trip, and one of them said to me, "No, seriously, Eric, this is a book, like not just like a legit book, like a Simon and Schuster book." And Simon and Schuster, if you're listening, sorry that you missed out on us. Anyway, but and he's like, and it should be turned into a movie, which hasn't happened yet. Anyway, but they're like they were being dead serious with me, because before it was always kind of like a little bit of a joke, like, "Oh, yeah, you should write a book." And like, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very busy. Where we have to financially recover from this thing now, and that's what we were focused on. And so I walked away from that conversation. I just thought, I wonder if there's more to this than I'm realizing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm not giving this experience the credit that it's due, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I think I'm going to write a book. And I started, and I was not getting very far at all. I tried for a year, and because I was so busy, I just couldn't ever carve out the time. I didn't have the good habits in place to make it happen.
Well, I know you were like, I'm going to try to do this 30-minute increments before I go to work in the morning. And
it never
I
happened.
saw you make valiant efforts.
I tried for a long time.
Again. Yeah.
And I might have started before I met with these guys. I can't remember. The timeline's a little bit mushy in my brain. But when they said it, I was like, oh boy, I need to get serious about this. I need to stop screwing around. And there's some aspects of choosing to write this book that I'm probably not going to go into in this conversation, which I think is okay. I want to keep to myself. But I tried to write it by myself for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And is it okay if I keep going on why?
Mm-hmm.
Because as a guy who has collaborated a lot creatively, writing musicals especially, and writing musicals is, there's no way to do it. You have to write it. You have to collaborate at some point. Even if you write it yourself, you end up collaborating with directors and designers and producers and actors and musicians and conductors, blah, blah, blah.
If you want to get it produced.
If you want to have a large scale musical on a stage, or even a small scale musical on a stage, there will be more people involved than just yourself. Mm-hmm. And I've been through that enough times in my professional life and had enough heartache from that experience that I didn't want to put that burden or that heartache on our marriage. Mm-hmm. So I was like, man, because I've lost a lot of good friends through that creative process. And we had a lot of fun for part of it. And the nice thing about a creative project is you're like, yeah, it was a good time, but I'm never going to work with that person again. And you can walk away. But when it's your spouse, I didn't want to go there. I was like, mm-hmm. yeah, we had fun writing a book together, but we have a book, but now we're not married anymore. That's, I didn't want to go down that road. So that was like a long winding tale version of that.
No, I think that was a pretty accurate version. Is whose idea was it? And I'm actually thinking that before we left on our trip, we met with someone who worked in a publishing office who asked us, are you going to have film crew with you out there? And we were like, are you crazy? Like, this is not a stunt. Like, we're scared. We don't know how it's going to go. We're just kind of going to get it done, and we're going to see what happens. And our boat is so tiny, and like the whole idea just seemed absolutely ridiculous to us at the time.
And we barely had smartphones. I think we brought 2 smartphones, and then one of them got
dropped one.
So we had one smartphone to film the whole thing.
Yeah, it was.
So there's very little footage.
It was pre-van life. We weren't trying to do this to show off to anybody. We weren't trying to like gather a following. We weren't doing a stunt project. And those are fine if you want to do those, explore. So many people want you to do things so they can live vicariously through you and not have to do them themselves. I say, just go do it yourself. But we were doing this for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason we kept a blog was because there were a lot of people that we loved who we wanted to like be able to share the experience with them. But it wasn't a marketing thing. We weren't trying to leverage anything. But this woman didn't she say that before we left?
She
like,
did.
Hey,
she said,
you?
Yeah, she said, are you taking a film crew with you? And we said, no way. And then she said, when you get back, if you ever decide to write a book about this, I'd love to take a look at it.
So maybe she planted the seed.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe she did.
Yeah, maybe it was in there underneath all of our anxiety and experiences and life lessons and triumphs.
Could be.
So
thank you, publisher person.
And then after we got off the boat, I remember thinking, yeah, we should write a book. And I didn't think about.
So it was your idea.
I didn't think about. This is how my idea was. When I talked about it, it wasn't about sharing it with the greater public. I just know that after you've experienced something significant, you're only halfway through the experience if you haven't reflected on it and considered what you learned and what you took away from it. And I wanted to have that document to complete the experience, to keep for ourselves, and to share with our children and potentially their children in the future. So that was the vision in my mind of, yes, let's write a book.
Which is much more noble, I should say.
May or may not be. Like, I don't want to qualify that, because what has happened is that we did share this book on a broader scale, and it has had the opportunity to inspire and influence the decisions of thousands of people who wouldn't have had that inspiration if we had kept our story to ourselves.
We would have been selfish.
So, okay. So whose idea was it? It sounds like this was an idea that came up over and over again, that had first attempts and second attempts, and then finally got off the ground. So, yeah.
Can I invoke big magic here?
Yeah, please do.
Remind me her name.
Elizabeth Gilbert is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and she also wrote Big Magic, which I maybe like way better.
It's way better. Big magic is basically the idea is that there are creative ideas swirling around in the universe, trying to find an artist to bring them to life. And if I were to say, whose idea was this, as I feel like this idea was knocking on our door, trying to get us to respond. And it was knocking on all the doors. It was knocking on the door of my heart. It was knocking on the door of your heart, of our friends who knew and cared about us, of our publisher acquaintances. It was just trying to find its way into the world. And so maybe that's where it came from.
I love that. So if you have something like that, an idea that keeps showing up again and again, maybe it's time to open the door. As Lily always says,
love is an open door.
That's correct. She comes knocking on our door.
Open the door.
Knock, knock. Love is an open door. Okay. So it started out with just Erik was going to write it. And then we talked to some more publisher friends. And one of our friends said, everybody is going to want to know, what was his wife thinking? And she added that most people who buy books are women.
All right, we need to have a debate in the comments here, or something so if you agree or disagree with that statement, make your voice heard on social media.
Yeah, if it's on YouTube,
or
you can put it there, or come find us on Instagram.
Men and women, speak up. We want to hear your voice. So if you agree or disagree, we want to hear why.
Yeah, who's the reader in your family? Is it the women or men?
And do you listen hard copy or audio? That's my next level of curiosity. So anyway.
So we decided that we would do it together. And at first I was very happy for you to do it. I thought, as long as it gets done, that's all I care about. You can have access to my journals. I'm happy to share my perspective. but you can do the work since you want to write it alone. And then Erik, I'll say nobly, I'll invoke that word for you, came to me and said, after one day after hearing that more women buy books, said, would you like to write this together?
That just goes to show how humble I am. That's what that shows right there, is my humility.
One day after hearing, they'll want to know what your wife thought. He said, you want to write this together?
Okay.
And so I said yes, and we rearranged our whole family life around it. So that the next question, we'll get to that, but the next question I want to ask is like, what were you afraid of before we started? And then I'll answer for myself because I have my own fears.
So the question is, what were we afraid of? What was I afraid of?
Yeah, what were you worried about or afraid of before we started? And maybe you already answered it.
I mean, I guess two things. One is that it would be a terrible book.
Okay.
You know,
now he mentions it.
and I don't know that, but I feel like that was a minor compared to, would we just hate each other at the end of the process?
So you thought that if I joined the project, you were afraid it might become a terrible book?
No.
You heard it here first, guys.
No wonder
we never said
that. Is no. I'm just saying in general.
Oh, okay.
If solo or together, if we wrote a bad book, I mean, what's the worst that could happen is that it's a sucky book, but
it dies in our computer. Yeah.
So there's that. You know, I think anytime you undertake a creative venture, it's, what if it never sees the light of day? What if nobody ever reads it? What if nobody wants it? What if people think it's stupid? You know, there's always a certain element of that. And of course, it would see the light of day with our kids. Like, they would actually have all of our kids read it. I feel like not all of them have. So we have not accomplished that mission.
We have
2 holdouts.
2 holdouts. Yeah.
2 out of 5. So that's 60% success rate is what we have there. That's how I'm going to choose to think about it. So it could be a bad book that just never gets picked up and never goes out into the world, which would not be awful, but there was that. And then I would say my other fear is that we would just drive each other crazy and hate each other by the end of the process.
Yeah. And I appreciated that. So one of my biggest fears was how much time it was going to require. And I was full-time homeschooling 3 kids still at home, 4 kids still at home. And so I just was a little nervous about how to make it work. And I remember when you told me, like, it's not going to be worth, you know, sacrificing our marriage to do this creative project. It's going to be really hard. And my thought was, life is hard. And whether you're single or you're married, it's hard. And so since we choose to be married, we know it's going to be hard, whether or not we have this creative project. And I think, you know, we could go through this time period, however long it takes, and there will be hard things that we have to work through in our marriage, and we could come out on the other side with no book or with a book. And I thought it would be cool to go for it.
I'm going to interject here, dear listener. I hope that as you hear, as much as we love talking about ourselves, I hope that you're listening to this story thinking, what's the thing that I want to do with the person in my life that I care about? And what am I afraid of? And what is the value of figuring that out and deciding whether or not to collaborate and what it might look like on the other side for you? Because the point isn't just to hear the story of writing our book. We're sharing the story of us writing our book so that you can figure out and do the thing in your own life that might feel scary or emotionally risky, you know, or, you know, you might have fear of rejection around it or judgment from others. So please just know we're not talking about ourselves to talk about ourselves. We're talking about this so that you can find a way through the thing that you're trying to do in your life.
Absolutely. And there were other times when we talked about collaborating, like you wanted me to climb with you up El Cap in Yosemite. And we looked at it. We considered it seriously. We tested my skill set and how quick I could learn the skills necessary. And we decided the safest thing was for me to stay at the base and for you to find another partner.
I think that's a good call.
To climb that. So it's not always like
mutually It's a mutual decision.
Yeah, you might decide not to collaborate in a loving, thoughtful way, and in this case, we, in a loving, thoughtful way, chose to collaborate.
Actually, I'll say we did choose to collaborate, but just in a different role. You weren't my
Mm.
climbing partner, but you were base support.
Yeah.
And you were, I think you were really an integral part of those climbs, and made it easier
Yeah.
for me. And,
Yeah,
and it was a lot more fun and satisfying to have you teaming up, but you were on the ground and I was on the cliff, and that's fine. Just saying, this doesn't mean we both have to be on the cliff to be collaborating together. It's just what's the right role for each of us.
Yes, take that metaphor as well, because it was a lot more fun and satisfying for me too. I was able to play to my strengths, and I knew you were safer and I was safer that way.
Hey, just want to take a quick break to tell you what's going on with sailing. First of all, people are having a blast on these trips, and we're actually kind of overwhelmed with the response, but we're having fun, so we're going to keep going. All right, so we do have some limited space for trips this fall and winter. All of our summer trips are full up, but in fall, winter 2024, we have room on a trip to Italy in September, Mexico in October, Thailand in November, and Bahamas in December. So there are limited spaces for those trips coming up. However, we also are booking into 2025. So in the winter months, we're going to be going to warm places like the Bahamas and the Caribbean. And then once we get more into summer, we're going to be in Europe. So Croatia, Greece, Italy, and hopefully we're going to do a week in Mallorca, Spain. So that's the lineup. And if you're interested in any of that, go to theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing 2024. This will also be in the show notes. You can also email us at hello@theawesomefactory.nyc. So go to the show notes. The link is theawesomefactory.nyc/sailing 2024. Even though we're talking about trips into the future in 2025, you can also email us at hello@theawesomefactory.nyc. Would love to welcome you aboard.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to ask about is what habits, practices, or rhythms did you put in place? And since my big fear was like how much time it was going to take, we looked at our day and we figured out which hours were your best hours, which hours were going to be my best hours, what the kids needed, how we could swap and make sure everyone's needs were being covered. It just took more coordination. That was one of the rhythms, but there was another one. I know you had some practices for like how you would move from being in your everyday life to, okay, now I'm writing this book, that you would kind of go through a rhythm or a ritual to help you get started and get creative.
Well, why don't we talk about how you and I share the time, and then we can talk. I'm happy to talk about what my personal kind of habit was for writing. I think first of all, I was best in the morning, and so we figured out a way to rent a writing space that was basically the apartment upstairs.
So there was a separate location where the work would happen that the kids were not in. So whether that's a rented space or a room but
yeah, there was a specific place where it happened, and it was dedicated to this purpose. And we decided that it would be, you wanted to do school with the kids first in the morning, and I felt freshest and best to write. And so I would go upstairs and I would write starting in the morning, and then I would work through till about 2:00, something like that, 1:00, 2:00. And then when I would come downstairs for lunch, and that was sort of the changing of the guard. And so I had a multi-hour block to write, which was powerful, to have a time and a place on a regular basis and enough time to actually get work. Because before I was trying to do it in 30-minute increments, and that's
not even a good nap.
No. Well, it could be a good nap, but yeah, it wasn't enough time to make the kind of progress that felt good as in a writing process. So time, place, and a sufficient block of time. And then I'd come down, we'd have lunch as a family, and then I would hang with the kids. School was done. You would go upstairs and you would work through till dinner time. And the kids, I was going to say me and the kids, but honestly, mostly the kids would make dinner.
Yeah.
Because they were capable, because they had that responsibility when we lived on the boat. And that was our rhythm. And so I think we collaborated that way, even though we alternated, we were a team, but we were never in the same place at the same time. And I think that may not sound like collaboration, but it actually was.
And you also would often go back up after dinner and write some
True.
more.
Yeah. So that was how we worked together as a team. And then I would say for my personal part, I would have to ease into it. I had to warm up. I had to warm up to it. And so I always started my writing sessions by journaling. I would just journal. And sometimes even when I had a room with nothing else in it except a desk and my laptop to write, I would still get distracted. There was literally nothing else there, but I would find ways for my mind to do anything else but write. And so if I couldn't get myself into journaling, if I was just scattered and procrastinating, I would open up a book. I would pick a book that I really liked, one that I wished I had written, and I would just start typing it out. And I would copy like title page, type it out. Chapter 1, introduction, whatever. I would just type it out. And I would do that until it got boring. And the amount of time that it took to get boring it varied. And then once I was bored, I'd say, okay, now I actually have some of my own thoughts that I want to put down. And then I would set aside what I called my copy work, and I would put that aside, and I would start my journaling. And my journaling would be a chance to sort of really reflect and talk about things that were on my mind instead of trying to just capture or restate somebody else's ideas or just retype somebody else's ideas. Anyway, and as I got into my groove with my own ideas, then I'd be like, you know what? Sometimes I would just start writing a story or a moment. It would just start to creep in. I was like, okay, I'm warmed up now. I'm going to start working on this section of the book or this anecdote or this moment. And I would write. And then I would go, and then I'd be like, oh man, whew, I guess I better stop now because it is lunchtime and Emily's waiting for me. And so um, every day was some variation of that, where it would be some days I could just go straight into writing the book. Some days I needed to journal, and then I could write the book. Sometimes I needed copy work and then journaling and then writing the book. But those are my phases to personally get myself warmed up and able to actually write. And that was just the first draft. Can I throw out one more idea about writing a book? Because for some of you, you may never want to write a book, but if you do, here would be my one recommendation. Write the whole first draft from beginning to end without ever going back to reread until you get to the very end. The payoff, you earn the right to go back and reread once you've written the last sentence and not before. And the reason is that if you do, you will always, always, always be bogged down in revisions and edit work, and you will never move forward. And so the rule for me, and the one that I would recommend to you, is just keep writing all the way through until you get to the very end. Then you earn the right to go back and revise. And it'll be easy. Like, oh my goodness, I said that 4 times because I never went back. And then it's easy to clean up. But write the whole book first, at least the first draft.
I love that. Also, for our listeners, if you're like, well, isn't that nice? They had the entire day to just write.
Yeah, it does sound sounds a little posh, doesn't it?
That's not my situation. That's not my circumstance. Hopefully the principles are still useful. The principles still apply. That it just required us to up level our communication, our time blocking, and bringing the kids into the process. For me, mine was a little bit different. I would go into the space and my head would be so in whatever I had just, had done school with the kids and whatever was happening with them. And so I would pray. And once I felt a sense of calm, then I would pick an area, a part of the story that felt easy to work on, and I would just start there. And I don't think I went through start to finish, but I did kind of like chunking. Like I knew what the whole story was. I didn't go back and try not to go back and edit, but I would just be like, oh, I know this story and it's going to fit in here. I know where it goes because we had an outline. So I would just work on wherever was the most, seemed like I would be the most fruitful that day.
Yeah, I would say another hack is that a story doesn't need to be written in chronological order or even in the order that it's going to appear in the book. You could say, I definitely know how this book ends, so I'm going to write the ending first, or I know this part in the middle, or I know at around page 60 it's going to be something like this, and you can just jump there and write that for the day. It doesn't have to be written from page 1 all the way through. And can I go back to your comment about, well, la-di-da, isn't that great that you had the whole day to write?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's true. It is. That was a very fortunate situation to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand as
Almost miraculous.
almost miraculous. And I think that it's worth noting that that was a deliberate effort and no small sacrifice
Yeah.
to get there. And all I'll say about that is that after trying for a year and change to write a book piecemeal, scattered in throughout the day of my other efforts, and not succeeding, and feeling the urgency of this project, we made it happen.
It kind of makes me think of a Cool Hand Luke situation. If you know the movie Cool Hand Luke, they're this group of prisoners, and every day they get taken out to work on the road or do some project. And no one's really excited. They kind of move as slow as they can. But this character has the idea, what if we work as hard as we can, and then the truck that's coming to pick us up is not going to come until late in the evening? So if we work hard now, then we'll have a couple hours where we can not be working, right? And
we can take a break.
We can take a break. And so I feel like that's kind of what happened to us, is like, you work like a dog for so long, and then we had this little window where you could take a short break. And in that window, we didn't not work. We wrote a book.
That's true. Yeah.
So
we know how to party.
We know how to party, right? We like to make stuff. So my next question was, and these will probably go faster, like, how did we involve the kids? And one of them you already mentioned, that we talked to them, we counseled with them about what our plan was. We asked if we could have their support, if they'd be willing to make dinners. They were really supportive of this, and we set up a dinner schedule. We had a chore chart. We had lots of things dialed in to make this happen. And I was so grateful to them that I would come down and there would be dinner on the table for all of us to sit down to. And they felt really proud of what they could do. They liked getting to choose exactly what we ate. And they also felt like they were helping make this happen, that they were the support team for sharing this story that they were also part of. And other ways that we involved the kids was they're in the story. Mm-hmm. Some people wish they were in there more. We kind of respect their privacy to a certain degree. We ran it past them, and we would check with them as we wrote sections with them or their siblings. We would read it aloud to them and say, does this sound accurate? What do you remember? What do you have in your journal about this experience? Like, keep us honest. And those are some ways that we included them. Were there any others?
I would say they're definitely on the support team. And that goes to the point of, just to be a collaborator on a project doesn't mean you have to be a third or fourth author. They were just part of the support team, which I think definitely matters. And then also, yeah, they fact checked us. They had their own documentation, and they had their own recollections, and they helped to make sure that we weren't trying to be dishonest, but they helped set us straight in many instances and helped clarify the story a lot.
Mm-hmm. And I think they've said, well, I could always write my own book if I want my story to be told. But in a lot of the cases, there were things that were happening, maybe emotionally or in relationships, and we just wanted to respect their privacy and the privacy of their friends, and wasn't really pertinent. Okay, what actually was hard? We'll do these last ones. What was hard? What was awesome? What surprised you? So what was hard?
I think getting the first draft was hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think revising was hard for
all the parts.
All the parts were hard. All the parts were hard.
And I love to say it was harder to write the book about living on a boat together for about a year than it was to actually live on the boat together for about a year. I
think the amount of emotional turmoil that you and I went through trying to get on the same page about some very, very charged and volatile, experiences was hard. And
even just creative expression.
Yeah, like, oh my goodness, word choice. Boy, we could go to the death about word choice. Okay. And I think, dear listener, you should know that we've came up with a policy that made it easier. Because if you've read our book, you know that we alternate chapters. One chapter is in Emily's voice, another chapter is in my voice, and on through the book. the truth is we both worked and reworked every single chapter, both of
Mhm.
us. However, when it's a chapter that is in my voice, I got the final say on word choice and like kind of detailed editing. And when it was in Emily's voice, you got the final say, which I think felt very fair. Like, hey, if it's going to have my name at the front of the chapter, I get to say I get final vote.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where and then we settled it. We would like fight about it for 5 or 6 or 9 drafts and then say, okay, now it's your call.
I think one of the things that I learned, one of the things that was hard, like you talked about the emotional turmoil, and whether it's revisiting challenging stories or creative choice, was recognizing the truth that sometimes slow is fast. And at the beginning of this episode, we talked about if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And if we wanted to go together, we wanted it to go smoothly. Sometimes that meant taking a couple of hours of what would typically have been scheduled as writing time to work through some of our emotional conflict or hurt feelings.
It became therapy time.
And we also had to be willing to say what we were feeling before we understood why we were feeling that way. Like we might have to say, I'm feeling defensive.
I don't know why.
I'm not totally sure why. I don't want to move forward in this feeling. I just want to like let you know that my walls are going up. And then we're like, okay, we are going to talk this through. So that part was hard. But when we answered the question, what was awesome, and there were some awesome moments I want to mention, but I think the best, most awesome takeaway for me was how we did up level our communication as a couple. Like it was hard to say, like, maybe he worked in the morning and I worked in the evening and you think it's all even Steven, but Erik is a much faster writer than me. And that can be really frustrating when you move at a different pace,
on both sides.
On both sides. Yeah. But what was awesome is starting to recognize some of our strengths and weaknesses, see what we each contribute, and just learning how to communicate better. What was awesome for you?
I'll say this, and I think this is what's awesome about any time anyone goes through this process for an experience. When we as people take the opportunity after a major experience to reflect and to document and to somehow commemorate the experience, the journey, everyone benefits. You benefit. The people that you love benefit. The strangers who may or may not ever come across it benefit. And I'll tell you why. Because what's the phrase that, writers are the luckiest people in the world because they get to live twice. Mm-hmm. They live the experience and then they get to make sense of it when they write about it. And I think that I'm probably butchering that phrase, but I think that's the essence of it, is that you get to then extract the nutrients out of it and you get double benefit. First of all, whatever it is, and if it's worth doing, it was probably hard, probably very challenging, and you overcame a lot. And so you're a stronger, better person for that. Then when you get to assess it and make sense of it and get your arms around what in the world just happened, then I think you have a real treasure. It's a treasure for you. It's a treasure for, like I said, for the people that you love and know. And then there's the people that don't know you. And we had a book randomly show up on our desk the other day. We picked it up on our walk. Somebody was giving it away, and it's A Year of Writing Dangerously. And it said that people read books, fictional or non-fictional, to see how other people handle difficult things. Mm-hmm. And we just need that. We need to know, first of all, that we're not alone in our struggles. Second of all, that other people are out there striving, and they they can be a tragic hero or they can be a hero here. I don't even know. It's like a what they can be inspiring or they can be disappointing, I
Triumphant, I
guess.
guess.
But just as we see other people dealing with difficult things, we take courage, we take heart. And so I think for me, one of the rewards of writing this book was being able to put something out in the world that hopefully gives other people courage, that hopefully encourages them and makes them feel that they're not alone on their own journey, and that the thing that they think is currently impossible is possible. And that makes me so happy.
I love that. That's been a great reward for me as well. I remember we had one reader who we got to meet in person, and she asked this question, like, why did you reveal character flaws in yourself? Why did you show yourself being petty? Why did you show yourself getting angry or um, having conflict in your marriage? And I'm like, can you imagine like living on a 38-foot sailboat for almost a year with practically no privacy and never having things bubble up? That doesn't seem realistic. And I mean, we told the truth and about our experience on the boat. And I did share those times when I was less than my best, and you did as well. And we also shared about how we forgave and how we healed and how we moved forward through those kind of things. And to me, that was really, really important. I was really hoping that as people read it and they saw, oh, Erik and Emily are fighting and they're resolving the conflict, I hoped that they would see what a healthy, resilient relationship looks like. That if you've had a couple of fights, that doesn't mean you're a couple that fights.
Oh yeah.
Who's the singer? I love his.
Oh man, he's the producer for
Is it
Connor
Graham?
Price. Graham, yeah. Hey Graham, shout out to Graham.
And
That's how cool we are. We know 22-year-old hip hop producers by name.
not in person, but we do know their
We went
names.
to his show. My daughters took me.
Yeah, I love it. And so I really appreciated that she asked that question, like, why did you do that? And I said, we wanted to be honest. We thought it would be hopeful for, like you said, people to see that it wasn't easy. This is how we handled the difficult situation, even when we weren't at our best. And then we tried to do a little better, the next time, and we kept moving forward, and there was a resilience there. And you know what she said afterwards?
Tell me.
She said, I'm so glad you did that because it made me feel normal. Like that she was newly married. She was like, oh my gosh, it's not 100% bliss. Have I done something wrong? And when she read our book, she realized, no, you can have a great marriage, a vibrant marriage, and still these things happen. So just because you have a couple of fights doesn't mean you're a couple that fights. So I loved that she got that takeaway from our story.
Can I just say it another way? Is I think it's helpful to us as human beings when the struggle is normalized. We don't want to make it up, but just say, oh, I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not the only one. It's hard for me, but I'm not alone. That sense of camaraderie is not really the right word, because it's not like you're in it together, but just say validation. Maybe it's validation is the word. That sense of like, okay, this is normal. That makes us feel like, okay, I'm not doing it wrong. I'm not flawed. I'm not stupid.
Flawed,
we are flawed and we are stupid, and we oftentimes are doing it wrong, but we're not alone. And maybe that's all we need to say. I'm not alone in this struggle. And if I'm, I can figure it out. I can connect with the people that are going to help me with this. And if I stay the course, I will overcome. And that's what we need. That's why we need to share our stories. That's why you, dear listener, need to share your story, because you have overcome things that the rest of us need to hear about. And when you do, and you share it with the world, if you choose to, it will make it easier for us. So that's my call, my invite to you.
I agree. And I like that it also said, here are some potential solutions. This is what worked for them. I could try that, or some adaptation of it. I could apologize. I could forgive. Yeah. I could stew for a little bit and write in my journal and then apologize. I could,
lots of ways.
So many ways. to handle it. So I really appreciate that. So there have been just incredible rewards. I would say it was totally worth it. I'm really glad that we did it. And it's been a huge benefit to me personally, in our marriage, in our family. And it's just such a joy when we get to read, reviews people put on Goodreads or Amazon or wherever it might be about how they were inspired not to go live on a sailboat, but to go do their own thing and say, wait a minute, I actually have more choices in life than I originally thought. And I hope that it also helps them to be open to collaboration, doing something together. And I hope this episode helps you, whatever it is in your life where you're working with people. People are messy, but people are worth it. What could go right?
What could go right?